Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to session 5, if my maths is correct. Please do take a seat. Make sure you got your teas and coffees and soft beverages. Great. Good to see you all back. Thank you very much. Okay, session number 5 is securing the digital supply chain. So, from semiconductors to software, we know that the technology supply chain is under a high degree of scrutiny. So how can telcos and their partners reduce the dependencies, increase transparency, and strengthen domestic and allied supply capabilities to support their sovereign objectives? What are the trade-offs between global efficiency and local resilience? Hopefully that gets us in the mood. We have 2 guests with us this afternoon, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting on my immediate right. Oh, and I've got to say, when you speak, please press the little button in front of you.
Thank you, Guy. Pleasure to be here. Great to meet you all. My name is Raman Mistry. I'm the channel partner lead for GSMA Open Gateway. The channel partner program is a broad church. We have aggregators, CPaaS vendors, hyperscalers, system integrators that encompasses that, and they typically will work with operators or take network APIs from operators and expose them and build innovative new services around that. So my background sort of is mostly been in software, so application development platforms, no-code platforms, and AI, but it's also been married with a lot of telco value chain involvement as well.
Thanks so much, Raman. And Beth?
So I'm Beth Cohen, and I'm independent, having retired from Verizon officially in December and came back as a consultant, which is kind of cool. It's probably the best of both worlds. And I've been in the industry for mumble years, going back to my time at Bolt, Brannick & Newman when I ran the Advanced Networking Labs and was involved in some of the early standards bodies, IETF, the VPN standards has got some of my fingerprints on it. And also my my interest in security is I teach security at the college level, and I am a big proponent of networks and security really need to be 2 sides of the same coin. So looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks very much, Beth. And Raman, you're going to give us a 3-minute introductory talk, so I'll leave it over to you.
Thank you very much, Guy. As a channel partner lead for Open Gateway, I work closely with GSMA Fusion. I have the privilege of seeing a side of the telecoms ecosystems that rarely features in traditional supply chain discussions, the role of open, programmable, interoperable networks that can actually help protect national digital sovereignty. We often talk about sovereignty in terms of hardware, and rightly so, who builds the radio, the manufacturers, the semiconductors. In the previous discussion, we talked about protecting energy resources through small nuclear reactors. So these are all essential. But in a world where capabilities are increasingly delivered through software, the virtualization of functions, the ability to access critical digital functions through open standardized interfaces rather than being tied to any single vendor, region, or proprietary stack are things that are really happening. And this is where kind of my role in GSM and Open Gateway and Fusion are making a strategic contribution. Our Fusion initiative works directly with enterprises, so it's asking enterprises and developers and vertical industry to understand the capabilities that they require to operate secure networks and innovative services. Those demand-side requirements feed into GSM Open Gateway, and GSM Open Gateway has over 290 network operators, spanning over 80% of global connections. And these APIs are used by operators in a harmonized way so that they can be deployed consistently. So it's not about convenience for developers, but it's about creating sovereignty and resilience and risk reduction. So there's lots of services like anti-fraud, identity verification, quality and demand, which can be accessed through these open standards instead of closed interfaces. So nations and enterprises are no longer dependent on the proprietary implementation of any single supplier. So we're now entering into an era of AI, where autonomous systems and cross-border IoT supply chains require trustworthy digital primitives. You've seen things like Model Context Protocol, which Anthropic has delivered. It's an open framework or protocol. And just recently, we've had Google who've come out with their agent-to-agent protocol, which now they've open source. So these kind of developments are starting to liberalize the market and making sovereignty less of a national issue and more of a global issue. And finally, I think the evidence is there. There's lots of initiatives that we're seeing with an open gateway. It's a new frontier for digital infrastructure. And Open Gateway and Fusion demonstrate that we do not need to choose between sovereignty and openness. They can both work in harmony. Thank you.
Thank you, Raman. Thank you very much for that. It's got us all thinking. Before I come to the floor for questions, there's a couple of questions we've been developing in advance, and this morning I think it was Manish who spoke about supply chain choice. Supply chain has cropped up many times this morning in previous panels. I'm not surprised. Beth, if I can come to you first on this one. What level of diversification in the supply chain, whether it's core or RAN, what is like the minimum required to achieve national resilience without incurring ridiculously high extra costs or risk technology fragmentation? How do telcos manage this trade-off? What we're talking about here?
So that's a very difficult question because supply chain is very complex, particularly for the telcos, because we have we're dependent upon hardware vendors, we're dependent upon software vendors. Telcos are not software companies, I know, despite what people think. We're technology companies and we're integrators, which is funny because I don't think the telcos are aware of just how much they're integrators, which means we're very sensitive to supply chain. And that's actually a big problem because, and I'll use the example of Huawei, which thank God Verizon never got into. And the reason it never got into it was because it does a lot of government work, and it was never allowed to use Huawei. But I know that many European operators got into it, and some of the American operators got into it, and it's a big problem now that people are dependent upon that single supplier. Now there are alternate suppliers to Huawei, fortunately, but there are some single supplier type arenas. I mentioned earlier this morning about SD-WAN. It's down to basically 3 operators at this point that develop, have SD-WAN. And there's a couple other areas where it's down to 1 operator. I think WAN optimization is down to Riverbed. End of story. Security there's a lot of security companies, but there's like 3 main ones. So the digital supply chain, there's always that you have to balance the diversity against the efficiency, against being dependent upon 1 operator or a proprietary system. I'm a big proponent of open source and standards as a way of kind of leveling the playing field to reduce the risk. But diversity also can mean multiple vendors. We have in Verizon, the company sells diversity, network diversity to Verizon means actually 2 carriers. Like that's how detailed it gets down to, it's Verizon and another carrier. So it depends upon the level of risk a given customer wants to get to.
Great, thanks, Beth. And as you say, it's a complicated question. It's a tricky question. It's very nuanced. Raman, what about you? Where do you think the operators and also governments should focus their diversification efforts?
Just to carry on from Beth's point about integration being a key component, I totally agree with that. And obviously, integration is supported but by having interoperable open interfaces, whether it's open source or open standards, and along with other organizations like the TM Forum and Amplify, GSMA are great proponents of that standardization and interoperable side of things. And I think again, to try and avoid fragmentation, that interoperability helps. I also agree with Beth in terms of having that plurality of companies that can address the needs of a network or needs of service environment is key to doing that. And again, going back to interoperable open interfaces, but if you've got vendors that can talk to each other fairly seamlessly without too much friction, that is a key enabler for this environment.
Great, thanks so much, Raman. Before I just take it to a slightly different question, any immediate feedback from the audience? Anybody want to? Thierry, is that yes? Thierry's going to press the button.
Okay, so supply chain. Let's zoom in on software, right? Because this is hardware and software, as you said, Beth. On software, the average of our customers, right? And I'm just dealing with core networks, luckily, not with radios. They have like maybe 5, 6, 7 suppliers at least for application software and middleware, like cast layers, Git, you name it. Right now, the practice has been that the suppliers, people, download that from a server somewhere in the supplier, and they upload that to a local repository. When the project is finished, right, it's the operator themselves who do this manipulation. Now, we are told that this is unacceptable, that we should, in fact, deny the rights for employees of the operator to upload software in those repos. Because one day there will be rogue employees that will be paid in Bitcoin to upload some ransomware there in your repos, right, inside Verizon. So we are told to say no, secure that with a CI/CD chain, whereby it's a robot, it's a CI/CD, it's a orb decapsulator, right? OCI release bundle. You know what it is. Yeah, it's an encrypted and secured package of software that will be opened by a robot inside your operator, and that will be the one that has the rights to give us a secure, a unmodified image coming from the vendor. Okay, question to you, Beth. Who will build this robot? Is it each one of these 6 suppliers, or is it going to be Verizon building it?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is the robot's not going to fix the problem. And I'll use it as an example. The open source community is already being attacked by the rogue states. So there was a major incident a couple years ago where I think it was North Korea, actually, unbeknownst to a lot of people. North Korea is actually really good at cybercrime, and in fact, apparently, much of their government revenue comes from this. It was they became part of the build team for some particular piece of very critical software in the open source community, and they inserted rogue software into that chain, and that's a big problem. And building robots isn't going to fix that problem.
For sure. So we, the suppliers, right? We also have a responsibility when we pick something from open source and there happens to be a ransomware in there. We will be held accountable because we are distributing this open source. Same for Red Hat, by the way, right? Everything is open source at Red Hat, and it's then distributed. So that's not the question. The question is, should the employees of the MNO be able to choose which software makes it into the network?
Okay.
Isn't that usually a decision that the CTO or CIO or head of digital would make rather than an employee?
Purchasing, of course, yes.
Yeah.
But the actual software image that can contain this malware, if it comes from a rogue employee who has modified this image, then we have a serious problem in our digital supply chain, which is the title of this debate, right?
Jerry?
Yeah, you do have a serious problem, and I don't think there's the proper guardrails in there. I mean, it's the responsibility of both the supplier as well as the telco to keep the software clean. I do know that many of the telcos, including Verizon, have private instances of a number of the pieces of software that are used for the development process, which does cut down to a certain extent the amount of rogueness that can happen. But you're not going to stop a rogue employee. That's the bottom line.
It also has to do with internal processes, the CI/CD processes that we have, and making sure you've got robust processes in place to stop that from occurring.
Great. I'd love to bring in Diego on this one. Can you come in, Diego?
Yeah, well, it's more a comment than a question. It's something that, the times are changing. This is something that we cannot, we have to live with that. It's true that this industry has been around for 100 and something years. We came 100 old, last year. And we are very much used, and the procedures that we are used are very much related to physical stuff. But in the past, still we were very much depending of humans that were switching. And then we get used to automatic switching, and then to electronic switching, and the store program changes and things like that. And we learn to do that. I'm confident that we will learn to do that. The point is that there is ongoing work. The problems with this digital supply chain and everything, and how you relate to the responsibilities of who is doing what and where, is something that is a problem that is currently active in many other places. And there are heavy investments by governments and by big corporations outside the telco space about this, and working on how you can define digital notaries, evidence that can be used automatically used, and at the same time that provide evidence in case of a dispute, and you go to the courts in Delaware to sort out the whole thing. And we are trying to solve it. And it's an issue. I agree, but it's something that we need to work on that.
We're working on it. Thank you, Diego. I do want to move on, because you've taken us quite nicely to another question, and I'm aware of time. And we had a $1 billion question this morning, I believe, but we've got another $1 billion question coming up. And that is, we do hear talk about the potential to create domestic semiconductor software supply chain, what have you, in countries outside of the US or China, and whether or not government should focus on supporting this and creating sort of niche strategic components, or should they look at a whole end-to-end manufacturing capability? What's the reality of this? Is Beth, I know you've got very strong views on this, but I've got a good feeling that maybe this isn't a realistic proposition.
I think the train left the station a long time ago. All the talk about bringing semiconductor manufacturing back to the U.S., that's a pipe dream that literally never existed. Because I actually recently read an article that said the peak U.S. domestic production of semiconductor chips was like in the 90s, and it was like 38%. So it was never even the majority. So I think that the reality is that that's impossible. You cannot. It's not cost feasible. It is a global supply chain. It takes a lot of countries to build a cell phone. It takes a lot of countries to build a router. It takes a lot of countries to build a computer, and that's just the reality. And we have to live with that. And getting to rare earths, that's it. it's just random where the rare earths are actually kept, and random countries ended up getting the hit the jackpot, so to speak. So I think that unfortunately, the geopolitical instability right now is a problem, but we can't solve it by just trying to bring the manufacturing back to be local, and certainly outside of. I don't think there's any country actually, including China, that can do it themselves.
Thanks, Beth.
I would agree that. I mean, I think that's such a tall order to try and establish the whole value chain within one country, especially when things are moving away from pure hardware and into software, as my opening remark talked about, virtualization of functions and putting them into software. So I think there'll be more liberal framework through, as we said about network APIs and open programmable interfaces. So I think it probably wouldn't make any economic sense for anyone to own that whole supply chain. And I think the reality of the market and the way things are going is, you want to have a level of interworking with other countries and organizations as well.
Thanks very much, Raman, for that. Now, just before we move on, I do like to keep an eye on opinions and trends from outside of the telecoms industry. And if I think I can use the clicker for this myself, can I? I can use the clicker. So this came into my inbox this week from one of the Substacks I follow. This is from, I don't know if you're aware of it, Azim Azar's Exponential View. If you're not, it's a well-recommended read, either free or paid. But he was putting together a thesis here on sovereign AI. What just caught my eye here was as he's determined it there, the sovereign AI stack, which includes infrastructure there in the middle, but also below that silicon, and of course power, energy generation at the bottom, power generation and grid, which I know Dean mentioned earlier on, and obviously above that the foundational models and data, and the trends from various nation states to up their infrastructure programs to build out that capacity. To greater or lesser degrees, and in the course of discussing this, and as I say, it's well worth looking at if you can. He came up with a line which I've just pulled out because I quite like this line. Haven't got my head around this yet. The era of the borderless internet has come to an end. The era of the sovereign stack has begun. Discuss. So slightly leading remark there, but any comments from the floor about this so far? Dean, let's go to you.
That sentence just kills the idea of 6G AI native dead.
Oh, that's another one to get your head around. Say that again, Dean, because I don't think the rest of the room digested that properly.
Can you frame that as a question?
Yeah, exactly. Discuss. No, I mean, essentially what that says is that the idea of a single global standard for AI is almost impossible. And therefore, the idea of a single global standard for AI native 6G is equally impossible, if not more. And I think that's a major issue, because you've just highlighted the fact that there's going to be all sorts of different sovereign interventions, which to be honest, it will mess with all standards, which are, in telecoms, which are AI dependent. But I'm picking that one out because it's something I've been looking at recently. But that just clarified it, that stack.
Can I comment on that? So you bring up a great point, but the fact is the telecom industry relies on standards. It can't run without standards. And, I lived the development of the standards, right? I worked for both Brannick and Newman back in the 90s when we were developing the standards that are underpin the entire telecom and internet stack. So, to go back to being sovereign and saying, oh, well, we're going to do it our little way, every single little country, it's just unfathomable. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that just leads to fragmentation. It doesn't help the industry grow. It doesn't help the supply chain grow, and I don't think that's a good way.
There's a couple more comments.
Yeah, we've got Monica.
So actually, I have a question also for Dean, I guess. It's, okay, so standards are crucial. We need standards, but do we need a standard for AI? It's like, do we need a standard for software? I mean, I just, the concept, because AI is just something that allows you to do things. So you do need a standard to have the interfaces, so I can use AI the way I want, you do it too, and we can talk to each other, but not AI as a standard. So maybe...
But if you mandated, this is the standard for AI lifecycle management, and this is the standard for AI federation between operator A and operator B. What happens when you roam? If you've got a certified phone, a phone which is designed to work against your national AI RAN, and then you roam to somewhere else which it's not certified against, does it work, or does it just fall back to 4G?
Which opens up the security holes.
But it's not AI. I mean, it's just like, whatever you need. So it's more like old school kind of standard. Because a lot of time people just talk about, these AI, you need to, you can just standardize everything. I mean, there's not a standard for everything. I mean, maybe you're on the same page. It's just...
There are obviously, which I said in my opening speech, standards evolving around AI and the way it might be used in telco in terms of the work that's going on in agentic AI and things like MCP, the Model Context Protocol and stuff. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that and things like autonomous networks, etc. So I think those kind of standards will be fairly... My assumption is that those would be fairly universally adopted because there is that impetus in those areas.
Can I just ask you, do you think there's a possibility of standards creep moving away from traditional telecom standards, heartlands, into these other areas which could be detrimental moving forward? Or are you confident that the standards organizations and related bodies are going to do the right thing and know what they're doing and will just continue the way they are?
I think our purposes will be to try and do the right thing, but to try and bring everyone along with us. So we talk a lot to operators, to channel partners, to everyone actually within the telco value chain to try and work to a common consensus. And GSMA, that's part of its core principles, and that's what we'll work to. So we don't want to see fragmentation. We want to see liberalisation and interoperability.
Thanks very much. We'll come across the room because I'm sure, based on this previous conversation or this current conversation, we've got some more thoughts. Christian.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the supply chain aspects. I think Beth presented in a very sensible approach. I mean, clearly nobody can do everything, and to your claim on that slide, obviously.
Claim on your slide, I certainly wouldn't believe in that sovereign stack myself. But what could you expand a little bit more? I mean, as we can't have one stack, no country practically can do it themselves. What are key aspects there? Maybe asking you, Beth, with your vast experience, what do we need to really think about as an industry as we go into this era?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's geopolitical issues, but we do really need to think about again, I'm a big supporter of standards and open source as a way of leveling the playing field, and it benefits the entire ecosystem. I'm the chair of the Anakit project, which Silva is based on, actually. The premise of the Anakit project was to build reference architectures and reference models of infrastructure to support telco workloads. Because everybody was going off and doing all their this and that and other thing. And, it costs the telcos tremendously to run all these non-standard proprietary stacks. It costs, Red Hat to maintain all these proprietary stuff. So it benefits the entire industry to have reference models and reference architectures to go back to. So the Anakin project, which is quite mature at this point, it's kind of boiled down to two reference architectures: OpenStack, which is widely used all across the telco industry at this point, and Kubernetes, or container-based, as I like to say, which is also becoming more and more widely used. So, the idea was that it would actually be used like straight out, but it isn't used that way. It's mostly used as everybody reads it and says, "Oh, yeah, I'll take this piece out of it," but it still has gotten us further along on that standardization and flattening the playing field. So that applies to the supply chain.
Thank you, Beth. We have a related question at the back.
Yes, Emil Brock from Stoete. I'm really curious, how do you value the security certifications? We as a vendor, we spend a lot of money, time, energy in getting the certification for you, like ISO 27001 makes it possible for you, common criteria. How do you value those?
So they are valuable. It doesn't stop telcos from doing their own testing. Pen tests are super important, and, any kind of, but having those certifications, still saves time and energy and money, because that means when the telcos aren't starting from scratch. So yes, telcos do really value that stuff, but it might not appear that way, because then they go ahead and do a bunch of testing on their own anyhow.
Just to follow on, yes, I agree. That's really important. Just in terms of what we do in GSMA, we do certification of Camara APIs. Camara APIs are those that are defined through the Linux Foundation, and we have a robust so we test the operators' APIs as well as channel partners as well, so that. And then we have a deployment map which shows all the operators that have got Camara. So that's really important, because this is to drive that liberalization and democratization of the marketplace. Because if a channel partner has built a anti-fraud service in Spain and it's using the same APIs as an operator, say Singtel in Singapore, then theoretically it's built once and deployed to multiple. They can take that to Singapore and offer the same service in that region. So testing and certification is imperative to help the whole interoperability and standardization in the industry.
Thanks very much, Raman. Because I was going to talk to you about APIs and how you basically ensure that layer is secure and trusted across other territories. So you kind of cover that there. Thanks very much for that. But I'd really like to get on, if I can, to another aspect. And we talk about sovereignty, and we talk about national sovereignty. But what about the concept of like trusted regions, or friendly allies, if you like? Perhaps friendly today, but maybe not friendly tomorrow. Is there any valid strategy here to adopt for operators to collaborate across regions on these issues, or even build out across regions?
Yeah, I think so. I think the EU is a good starting point here. Yes, NAFTA was, but whatever. But I understand that Canada and Mexico are actually just kind of jumping over the U.S. I think there are shifting alliances, but I think there is still real value in those regional collaborations and alliances. I'm not going to say that NATO is useless. I think it's very powerful, and it should hold. I'm praying it holds. Yes.
Thanks, Beth. Raman.
Yeah, I would agree, especially somewhere like Europe. You've got things like the EU AI Act and GDPR and other things that are trying to standardize things across the region. Perhaps it might that might be shared across infrastructure such as energy as well. You could have several companies sharing energy resources. When you get these small reactors, etc., coming through. So yeah, I could see that there could be some regional standardization that could occur in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. And it's certainly something we've been talking about earlier today as well about this. We've got a couple more questions, and I'm going to come first of all to Mike at the front.
Thanks for the reference to fraud and security, Raman, as you just referred to. But I'd like to just take it a bit further to open source, if I may. How can we secure the digital supply chain with all of the open source suppliers, but minimize the risk of some suppliers that might be in that open source supply chain? There may be some from unwelcome countries, for example, or some that might not be so welcome because they bring cyber attacks with them. How can we do this?
Good question. Who wants to go first? Beth?
I'll be happy to talk. I actually think the open source community has a better chance of protecting itself than the proprietary. There's the 0 Day Alliance, and obviously there's 0 Day attack hunters out there looking for 0 Day vulnerabilities. And open source has, since it's open, it means that pretty much anybody can go in and keep looking for those attacks. In fact, the one that I mentioned earlier was found by somebody who was using the code and was like, well, wait, this is not right. And he went in and he found it. So I think that the open source community just has a much better chance of doing it, of being able, because it's open and everybody can see it.
Thanks, Beth. Raman, do you want to come in as well?
I agree with that. I don't think I've got anything further to add, but I agree with everything you said there.
Can I just say, I think that needs to be made more visible and better understood for everybody to agree with you. I'm not sure it's well understood today.
I agree with you that it's not that well understood today. I think I've heard other people say this, that's the strength of open source. I think that when that attack happened a couple years ago, everybody was a little surprised and was kind of taken aback. But on the other hand, I should point out that attack took 2 years for it to be done. The attack that Israel did against Hezbollah took 10 years to infiltrate the supply chain of the pagers. So, these are things that take a long time to do.
Great. Thanks very much, Beth. I'm going to come across to this side of the room at the back here for another question.
Yeah, following on to Mike's question. So I think everybody can look into open source, and we've debated, I think there was general consensus that open source is a good thing for the supply chain. But who controls open source? Who governs it? And that really depends on not only the licenses, we didn't want to talk about the legal aspects, but also on the actual control. For example, Raman, you said you're so happy that Google contributed something, but Google, of course, controls, is the project continually funded? Who is allowed to issue merge requests? Who is deciding on the merges? In which direction does the interface evolve? Google can just say we want the world to think this way. Now we're just spending a little bit of money, and it has a huge lever in favor of future Google business, right? And the other question about open source is kind of community-driven, random, in good way, random movement, right? Standardization is a very peer-review driven model. In the original SDO model, all peer groups of the society are to be heard. Not in all industry forums. Usually the ones that pay most have the most say in industry forums, but still there is some sort of different governance. And how do you rate that? Is it wise to base a whole new industry like Camara, for example, purely on contributions of people in goodwill? And under different kind of governance schemes like Linux Foundation, driven by the US government, funded a lot, Google funded by themselves, etc., etc.
Thought-provoking questions, as always. Thanks very much. Raman, would you want to just jump in here?
Yeah, you raised some good points there. From my experience, there's for example, the Linux Foundation, which you pointed, which are the arbiters of the Camara API specification. They have fairly robust governance procedures in place, and I think that's the only way that you can operate this. You've got to have fairly governance, and you've got to make sure that there's no one party that's having overdue influence in terms of what you roll out. So there's a very kind of consensus-led discussion that happens around, what are the APIs we've got today? What are the ones that you're going to have on the roadmap? It's all driven through that community. And I think as long as you've got strong governance in place, that's only going to help that kind of open source community.
Beth, do you want to add?
Yeah, sure. So I'm involved in the open source as well. By the way, Aniket is in GSMA, as you know, so it flows down into it. And I've been involved in the OpenStack community for many years, and there is a risk there that a given company will kind of dominate the ecosystem of a given project. But what I've found is over time, the projects that are most successful are the ones that have multiple sources of support, not just Google. And so when Google pulls their funding, it doesn't just die. And there's plenty of open source projects out there that are just dead. And that's okay because it's an evolving ecosystem. And if nobody's interested anymore, then, it goes away or it just gets archived. So.
Okay, thank you. Great, thanks so much. One final question in the 3 minutes we have remaining.
Yeah, so my question is sort of the flip side of the sovereignty. So if I'm a Chinese whatever, and I don't have access to whatever hardware, I just run my workloads out of Singapore. How is that? Should we be worried about it from a security, supply chain, or whatever point of view? It's sort of like the opposite of sovereignty, right?
That is a problem, yes. Although on the flip side, companies that do business in China have a real hard time setting up VPNs because China blocks them. So that's a serious problem because China, of course, has the Great Firewall. So, and Turkey has a firewall too. There's a couple other countries that are doing it. Cyber warfare is definitely becoming a bigger and bigger problem.
Oh, I'm not talking about people that do, big players that, just do it with the government allowing it because they actually want it. So is that a concern? It's not individuals doing it.
Yeah, I think it depends.
I don't see that would, in my view, any of that would be because a lot of these big organizations are part of lots of consortia or standardizations bodies. So it wouldn't be in their interest to do that. So I don't really see that happening, but that's my view.
I know it's happening. But that's...
it's definitely happening, yeah, for sure. But, again, it depends upon what their reasons for doing it. And, I'll use the example of TikTok. Which you better believe they are collecting data on U.S. citizens. And, now there's this the Congress stepped in and said that they couldn't stay in the U.S. and then, the administration changed and things are different now, right? But, who knows where that's going. And if you don't think your data's out on the dark web, you are sadly mistaken because it is out there. Every single one of us.
Well, what a really gloomy, depressing way to end our session. Thanks, but in an important way as well. And this question you asked, Monica, it's great, and we should follow up in the break because it's time for a break now. Our 45 minutes has whizzed by, so coffee and hopefully cake is served next door. 20 minutes until the next session, the final session of the day. But now, please give a warm applause to our two guests. Thank you very much.